You're listening to Two Beers Until Phronesis, a philosophy podcast by students and graduates. Whether you've never heard of philosophy or have a philosophy PhD, we hope you enjoy these conversations as we discuss some of life's big questions over a few beers. Enjoy. Okay, so this episode, I'm here with Nye. Hello.
Hello.
And Sam.
Hello.
And Joe.
Hello.
And there's fucking way too many of us in this little room with this tiny, shitty mic. So we're going to be talking about pseudoscience, superstition, and alternative medicine. And we're going to try and be as level-headed as possible, because I think most of us have relatively critical views of these things.
Yes.
Yes. So should we start with the definition so that people know what we mean when we say things like pseudoscience?
What the fuck are you talking about? What's the thing?
Well, no, you had a definition, didn't you?
Well, I can give you one. So,
just sitting in the corner drinking now.
he had a definition.
He's gone.
But he doesn't have anymore.
Pseudoscience is stuff that is claiming to use certain empirical methods that it doesn't.
Like astrology,
So astrology will claim that it's using an evidence-based system to, prove its claim, but it's not science at all. It's not using a scientific method to verify it.
Okay, so psychology is also a pseudoscience under that definition, or at least I've heard it around uni called a pseudoscience. In a technical sense.
I think the problem is it is a pejorative label.
Yeah.
It is inherently a pejorative label, and I don't think psychology, to a great extent, does that. I think there are many aspects to psychology which are scientific and do use studies and large.
Yeah. I think the difference with psychology is that it doesn't operate out of a paradigm. It doesn't have any established theory that it works from. That there's a consensus within
Well, it's more like an exploration. They're not saying these are the things in psychology.
I haven't studied psychology, so I don't know, but I think it's the case that there's not enough consensus on fundamental paradigmatic beliefs within the... What's the fucking word?
Well, so there's fields like psychometrics, and psychometrics, for example, is mostly where you're literally getting data based on what people do and how people react to certain things. So psychometric research would be stuff like where you get stuff from, like the Big Five from, which is where they try to figure out what is a statistically significant aspect of someone's personality. And it's like, no matter how many tests you give people, no matter different times, it does seem to be that you can measure 5 distinct traits. So there are certain aspects to it where you can say, well, there is this statistically significant thing that is emerging from a load of data, which you find in something like psychometrics, and then broader psychology would pick up on certain aspects of something like psychometrics or sociology, or like studies that are based on people's behaviour, or observations based on people's behaviour, or clinical studies, and then they would use that to try and build a picture or a theory of how people operate. And that's what I would say psychology, how it operates to a greater extent.
So it is trying to work in a scientific tradition as it is trying to find something, test something, and prove something.
There's no doubt that it uses the scientific method, but what it doesn't have is the theory of relativity to underpin it. It doesn't have those things. That
would be like the Big Five almost. They're trying to boil it down, but it's like the theory of relativity. It's like if you look at like Newtonian physics before, that was like the accepted laws. Yeah, and they went, that's not true. So it's probably the same with psychology.
You've got to remember, relativity is a theory, and this is the same.
Yeah.
This is the same issue. They're theories, so they're ideas about how the world works that have ways in which they can be tested, but they're still theories. They're not like
they're open.
They're not infallible.
Disproved.
Yes, they're open to be disproved. They're open to be tested further and perhaps adapted for better theories in the future. And many models in psychology do the same sort of thing.
Have you ever read Thomas Kuhn?
Is that the Scientific Revolution?
Yeah, Structure of Scientific Revolutions was his book, and he came up with the idea. He basically coined the term paradigm shift.
Yeah, and just
So basically, he says there have been 3 paradigms within science: Newtonian physics, and being one of them. So, before that, Aristotelian physics, and these were the frameworks we operated in. And science works by continually trying to disprove the paradigm it's in. It has to work within that paradigm to have some kind of basis of where you're coming from. You know, you can't just go, I'm not going to use kilograms.
But we have to study the paradigm, because like the way I think wasn't it the Kuhn looked at it is, he went, what you have to do is use scientific methods to study the paradigm that you're in, or that you believe you're in, as well as you can, and then eventually you get to the point where you study it and you go, oh actually that's not true, and then you see something that it completely changes the way you see something.
Hence the scientific revolution in which a new paradigm is adopted. But yeah, before we get going on tangents about that kind of stuff, I'm not critical of psychology or anything, and I wanted to talk.
You've been talking a lot of smack about psychology.
No.
Coming over here.
I'm saying psychology is in that sense is only like a technical exclusion from science.
Yeah.
Even though it is.
Well, there's many.
Science.
You can pick any arbitrary field and say, is that pseudoscience? But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the problem is with labelling something as pseudoscience is it's claiming that psychology, for example, to take psychology, it's like claiming that, say, like psychological theories are based in nothing, or that they have no foundation from where these theories are coming from, which is not necessarily true. They often are coming from logical places, or they often are hypotheses or theories or whatever. The same way, relativity is a theory, but it is based on a lot of mathematics and a lot of ideas that were leading up to many of those things. So I think the problem is pseudoscience has become a term that is generally used to designate things that are.
There's only one science, and that's crystals. We can all believe.
But yeah, I wanted to talk more about mediumship and astrology and that kind of stuff.
Now we're into the proper bullshit.
Yeah, Snarkle make out against
So has anybody had any experiences with?
I've had people tell me my horoscopes, and now people
Is that newspapers?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And no, I mean, someone will go, "Oh, my horoscope says this," and I'll go, "God, then what does mine say?" And it's like, you will either have a life-changing moment, and you're like, "Oh yes," like fucking everything's a life-changing moment. But it makes you look out for them, and then you see something which is like a normal event, and then you attribute it backwards.
Self-fulfilled prophecies.
That's effectively how it works. And with more impressionable people, it's going to have more of an impact. Like, I read an article, I think it was actually on the BBC, I say news with wider sense of the word, given that it was on there. There's about a woman who basically got addicted to these astrology articles to the point where she literally lost her job, and was had newspapers all around the wall with contradictory, obviously, horoscopes. And then but she could relate to every single one because they're so vague and that impressionable, you can draw events from your life. Look back, and then once you're in there, you don't really get out.
I think once you start putting once you've got the third fucking horoscope stuck to the wall, that's the point. that's the point where you're like, oh yeah, I've actually lost it. You've got 3 different horoscopes.
You would think, but
What are those things? What are they called? Barnum statements.
Yes, I think it's Barnum paradoxes, Barnum statements, Barnum questions.
Barnum.
Yeah, Barnum. And it's the idea is yes, you make a statement, you make a proposition that has all the possible outcomes of the proposition within the sentence. So it's you say something, and it's impossible for the person to interpret the sentence as anything other than yes, that's me, because you've loaded the question full of opposites of this thing. So for example, if you wanted to make a statement about someone being either an extrovert or an introvert, you've done the classic example, and this is from Darren Brown, is he'll say something like, when you go to parties, you're both a bit you're a bit socially anxious, a bit withdrawn. You're a bit hesitant to necessarily just go out for all that. But you enjoy the company. You like being you don't mind being in the atmosphere, being around people. That sort of thing is fine, and that sort of thing. And it's most people start to interpret that as. And the further you go into that, and I'm not I can't remember that example word for word and exactly how he words it, but it's there's ways in which you can construct these sentences that would appeal to both the extrovert in that scenario and the introvert in that scenario, and then suddenly you've got the polar opposites of those personality types captured in the same thing. However you listen to that, you're going to interpret that as, oh, that's me, because either you're an introvert or an extrovert, whatever you are, it'll have that part of the statement reflecting part of you in it.
It's like confirmation bias, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was just about to say
you take the stuff that's fitting you, and then you disregard all the other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that you disregard, say if you're an introvert, you disregard the extroverted aspects of that statement and go, oh yeah, but the introverted parts of that statement, yeah, those are definitely me. And so that's roughly how a Barnum statement would work, and they use them a lot in like tariff reading and
Yeah, and I think if you're the kind of person who's already looking at a horoscope, you're probably likely to believe. You're looking for something to believe at that point. So, yeah. Anything else? Have we ever come across? I mean, we used to do our paranormal investigations.
I thought you didn't give us the acronym there.
I'll give you the acronym. Paranormal Paranormal enforcement and negotiation.
Oh yeah. Okay.
An investigation squad.
I like negotiation.
Yeah.
Negotiation is like you're gonna
Negotiation with a poltergeist. Just so we could say the word penis, really. And that was when we were in high school, and it was mostly an excuse to eat curry. But we did dabble in a couple of séances. We had a Ouija board, and
bit of black magic.
of course we never
Fucking Ouija board.
found anything. We were just trying to get your dead uncle. Who was it?
It was well. It wasn't. I think it was technically my great uncle. I knew him as my uncle, who had died fairly recently. I think at the time, for some reason, we thought we would be a prime. I don't want to say target. I'm not really sure what the word is. To resurrect, and shock horror to no success. Maybe we didn't sacrifice enough people.
Yeah, you go or
Not enough curry on the.
Not enough curry.
board.
I think we turned out the lights, and then a bus started up at the bus stop, and then we went, oh, fucking ghosts.
It's fucking Joe's uncle on the bus.
Yeah.
Man, good days, good days.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like my experiences mostly with a lot of the new agey kind of stuff have been family, friends, and examples where it has been really harmful and actually caused like people to die and that sort of thing.
Oh shit!
Yes,
What's this?
one example was so like homeopathy. A friend of my stepmom, she had breast cancer, and she was really into the alternative medicine stuff, and she could have they caught it early. These days survival rate is quite high. If you catch it that early, she probably would have been fine. Bit of chemo, that sort of thing. And she had a family. She had a husband, she had 2 kids. And it's like, but she still was so obsessed with the alternative medicine, that sort of stuff. She even went to America, I think, to get some special alternative medicine, all that sort of thing, to heal her, and she died.
Yeah.
And you've left 2 kids and a husband, and you've left a family, and it's like and at that point for me, it's like that can cause quite severe damage.
Okay. Should we explain what homeopathy is as well? Homeopathy is funded by the NHS at the moment. They spend several million on
To be
it.
fair though, it's like placebo is the most powerful.
Yeah,
it's the most powerful
Yeah,
healing thing.
that's
So it's a
true.
pretty legit. Like if it's something that's capable of being healing by the body, like not cancer.
Yeah, not breast
Cancer's
cancer,
not great
yeah.
because it's the body
I mean,
killing
yeah,
itself. But it's
to an
like
extent, right?
Yeah,
it's like your body can just heal itself, and if you believe in the treatment, and if you're going and you're doing like a legit ritual,
Yeah, an
like
intricate
you're
practice.
firing up your like body's natural way of healing. So it's like
Yeah,
it
it's
might
be-
work for some things.
It's better than a sugar pill.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's more to it. But I think several million, given the state of the NHS, on placebos is.
Fuck the NHS.
But like,
Strong statement.
fucking hell. But maybe we should explain why we think homeopathy is bad. Anyway, like.
Well, that I'm not gonna say that because
I mean,
Because it's pseudo-science.
Yeah, so
Hey.
it's not based on any verified fact. So the problem with these kinds of new agey medicines and things is obviously that they're not based on any kind of science. We'll say that. We'll get into that maybe, but they also they have no proof behind them that they work.
I don't know. Homeopathy's been shown, and same with some placebo things, been shown to be pretty fucking effective.
Okay.
Just not for like cancer and stuff. For those of you listening, Joe is just unpackaging a pasta salad, but now is the perfect time for
I
like
do apologise. I didn't think it'd be that
a
much.
delicious, crunchy bit of clean thing.
Yeah, so I'm going to read the definition because homeopathy is a system of complementary medicine in which ailments are treated by minute doses of natural substances that in larger amounts would produce symptoms of the ailment.
So it's like if you have cancer, they give you a little bit of cancer water, then they water that down.
I mean, to be
And
fair,
then they water
that
down.
is how
and they
vaccines essentially work.
think-
Yeah, of course.
But it's like you can't vaccinate yourself against like fucking meningitis, can you?
No, I mean,
I
yeah.
don't know, can you? You might actually be able to. It's just like picture.
I mean, you definitely can't vaccinate yourself against cancer because
Yeah,
cancer
it's-
just doesn't work at all
yeah, it's
like
a,
that.
it's a bodily thing, isn't it?
So things like crystal sound activation and Reiki, there's no established peer-reviewed scientific journal that's ever found any evidence that they work any better than a placebo.
Yeah, but placebo is fucking legit though. So it's like if they work better than placebo. Placebo is like one of the most effective forms of medicine. So it's like if the basis is like not that I'm a fan of Reiki or crystals, but if it's like no worse than placebo, that's still like very, very good. Because that's what they test all pills against. They test all pills and they have to beat the placebo test. And they go like, is it better than placebo? And a lot of them aren't
Yeah.
because placebo is just fucking legit.
I just think rather than turn to acupuncture,
Ooh, acupuncture pretty good apparently.
well, someone died the other week from acupuncture because they used bee stings and they were allergic.
Oh, dude, that's a fuck up. That's like
I mean,
that-
it just does sound like natural selection at that point.
you sign up for the bee sting extra, and then they go like.
I mean, if
Oh,
they
yeah.
didn't know they were allergic, okay, but if they
That's
did,
pretty- but then they test that you
Isn't that
tested when you're born, don't you? So you're tested for like peanut allergy and bee allergy, and then you get EpiPens and shit.
Yeah, I mean, so the moral conundrum here is: at what point does the delusion of a placebo that has a whole framework around it become justified in in actually helping people to believe in a placebo, as opposed to the fact that when it goes too far and then people take it too seriously to try and heal
Yeah, well,
things they can't heal.
surely the best approach is to try legitimate medicine first. Surely those are better than placebos anyway.
I don't know, but like, what do you define as legitimate medicine? Because legitimate medicine are things that cause things like massive opioid problems. So it's like the forms of legitimate medicine that we have are just like a lot of
Like
highly
painkillers.
medical treatments, like opioid based.
So Reiki is a way of massaging someone without touching them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sticking up for Reiki. I think
I know, but
I think Reiki is like
at that point,
they tell you to shut your eyes. They walk out the room for 5 minutes, and then you pay them like 50 quid.
yeah, but at that point, is not just better to get a massage. I know some people do say, okay, Reiki,
Yeah.
Reiki, regardless of whether or not they believe in chakras and points of energy that could be channeled by people with special powers that can
Yeah.
channel it. They say that
Reikists. Can we call them Reikists?
we can maybe call them Reikists, but a lot of people think that they'd rather be touched. They'd rather be non-touched by a Reikist than touched by a rapist.
That's the metric it's measured success against. Would you rather get attacked on a street by a monster?
What I mean is, a lot of people.
It's not bad when you consider being raped.
No, what I mean is, a lot of people don't like being touched, and they wouldn't want to be in a room with someone, but they do have backache, so they'd rather somebody channels the energies than actually touch them and administer chiropractic medicine.
That's very weird.
My other problem with these
Chiropractic
things,
medicine's also, like, it's found that it's bollocks. It's literally snake oil salesman founded it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's just like a pseudoscience that has become so effective that we've just gone, oh, that's legit, that's now part of it. So it's
Well,
like, maybe Reiki, after its magical effects, not again that I believe in Reiki, but maybe that like 10 years down the line would be like just an accepted thing.
Are you sure? I don't know, I haven't looked
Yeah,
into
dude.
it yet, but there's just so much.
It was literally just a guy who went around the old west just cracking people. And then he went like, oh yeah, apparently this works. Obviously, like now it's like basically completely different because I imagine like sports science massages.
Right,
like,
because I
crazy.
genuinely know friends who've been helped out with back
Yeah.
problems and stuff because of it, and I also know that you actually have chiropractors for horses.
Yeah,
and
and
stuff
I
now.
know how it started. It was
It's
just literally
crazy, you know.
a queasy geezer just walking around.
Yeah.
and
But it
go,
must be based on.
It is now, I think, because
Yeah,
there's so much sports science research. It's like they can just go back and
Yeah.
like they know so much more about the body than they do like 30 years ago.
Yeah. But here's the other thing. If the NHS wants to recommend, or any doctor wants to recommend a placebo, they know in which context placebos should be recommended and in which case other medicine should be.
Like a medical.
Yeah. Someone who
Context.
practices Reiki doesn't need any qualification. I could literally just set myself up as a Reikist. I could just have a little office above a laundrette And
But
anyone,
you always look like a Reikist to me.
this goes for
It's just a beard.
this goes for yoga. It goes for basically any alternative practice that isn't you can't get on the NHS.
Well, I think, can you do, is it the same with yoga? No Zumba, you have to go like in some mad classes and shit.
You can practice yoga, doesn't matter.
Oh, fair. Well,
Yeah.
fair.
I mean, it would help if your name was Raj instead of Dave, and it would help if you had some sort of certificate, but you can just openly practice this stuff. And a lot of people like your relative or friend of your relative, I can't remember who it was, sorry.
Friend or family.
Family friend.
Family friend. Yeah.
People like your family friend, they don't know this. They don't know that there aren't official channels for these people. They don't really understand.
Channels, sorry.
Alright. They don't really understand the process in which someone becomes a doctor as opposed to somebody who practices alternative medicine. They don't understand what it means to be peer reviewed and to hold up against evidence and things. And I'm fine with people believing whatever nonsense they want and whatever things that may be true, but I think when you come to practice medicine on someone, you probably need to have more than I think this is true and I've got nothing really to back that up.
Do you guys know about the homeopathy dilution stuff?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No,
where
no.
it's like, so with homeopathy, the point is you dilute a thing that's supposed to cure the thing, and you keep diluting it and diluting it and diluting it to like 1 part in a million, 1 part in a million, 1 part in a million. What's funny about a lot of these dilutions is by the third or fourth dilution, there is on average zero of any molecule of the original substance that was diluted by the third or fourth point, which is quite funny. And then obviously the defense that a lot of the homeopathists, their defense became, well, yes, we have diluted it to the point where there is not a single molecule of the original thing in the water anymore, but the water has a proper memory property, or some ability to remember the molecule, and the spirit of the original thing is in the water, and that's what ends up in the final dilution. But there was also, funny enough, there were some actual forged studies to do with like homeopathy dilutions and water memory and things like this. And I do remember that there was one example where I can't remember any names, but they published a paper that proved this water had a memory for this dilution, whatever, blah 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 blah. And then yes, obviously it got it even got through peer review and whatever. And then years later, they went back and were like, oh, this person was just literally cherry picking the results that they were making, whether they were trying to find certain properties and. Yeah, and it was absolute complete bollocks, but it's amazing how many times it's slipped through the net and how many excuses keep coming up for this idea that, well, water remembers the essence of the thing that was originally diluted. And,
I was going to say, like, people in that sort of position, they do take on a responsibility to not circulate that kind of stuff. Like, the whole anti-vax movement can basically be traced back to one guy who was a doctor, I believe, who published this paper that's since been discredited over and over and over.
What?
Because he gets picked up and he is in a position of authority in his respective field, the kind of credibility that he had, at least at the time, gets carried over. And I mean, look at it now, like, we're literally starting to see traces of these previously eradicated diseases now come back just because people aren't...
Was it smallpox in America?
Yeah.
Smallpox.
Measles.
Literally.
Yeah, measles as well.
So it's not just a danger to their own children, but literally endangering all other people who do vaccinate their kids.
It's because people say that it gives, like, one of the big ones, like, that gives their children autism, and it's like,
I think we've all got autism.
Well, that was
like obviously, but it's like part of the thing with that is like that's just a symptom of the aging generation, because that's just I found out that it's just like causal with as you get older and as you have children older, that's there's a higher chance for people to have autism. So that's just what it is, and everyone's just having children later and later and later. So as people go like, oh, that's happening. I mean, I don't know. There's obviously stories of people who go like, oh, well, my child was fine, and then we had a vaccination and then something. But it's like, I think it's just. And
Perhaps there's a causal link. There is a causal link between aging. The older you're pregnant, and the number of problems associated with the pregnancy, but the autism thing is a difficult one because of there could be so many factors that are contributing towards the rise in rate of autism,
or
including
it's
the way the
just-
diagnosis
it's diagnosis.
goes,
It's diagnosis.
Yeah.
But one thing that popped into my head there was like the whole nut allergy thing. You know, like the
Yes, yeah.
the how people react to different medicine was like you could have penicillin and be fine. I could have penicillin and turn into gas. and then it's like so. I guess maybe there are actually some kids who have it and then it triggers something off. But I think I don't like the way that they say like something is caused by something. But yeah, I think you're right. It's fuck anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
Weird people.
Yeah, triggers me pretty bad.
But that's pseudoscience though, because they're literally taking one scientific paper, ignoring the other
Ignoring,
400,
yeah.
and then just choosing what they want to choose. Like
It does boggle my mind how this kind of mindset where you pick up on one very obscure, discredited thing, and you
Flat Earth.
stick to believe. For example,
space is fake.
yeah, you stick to believe that, and you ignore all the other overwhelming evidence. I don't understand genuinely how you get to that mental stage. Is it like attention, or is it
I
just
think a lot of people are dogmatic.
anti-authoritarianism?
I think a lot of people are dogmatic. I don't think.
Maybe.
I think if you want something to be true so strongly, and this is the same for like any kind of religious fundamentalism, the language of propositions and statements and whether things are true or not just aren't valid anymore. They sort of go in one ear and out the other because part of you just shuts that kind of stuff down because you just really want this thing to be true, and you'll find any kind of way to make it true. And I think lots of people are dogmatic about lots of different things. I think it doesn't just extend to kind of metaphysical beliefs about fairies and ghosts and things. I actually knew somebody who believed in fairies, genuine fairies that live in the wilderness and live in gardens and things.
I quite like that. It's quite nice.
It's
That's
nice,
quite
isn't
a
it?
wholesome belief.
It's harmful. It's harmless, isn't it?
I like the Japanese thing. Not like they're much about it, where they believe that everything has like spirits and stuff, and that there's like different spirits of things. And that's quite a nice way of thinking about it. It makes you more at one with things.
And I think another way to think about these ideas is that I think you've said this as well, they're functional.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's like functional narratives to fit certain heuristics that allow you to navigate through life a bit easier if you have a certain heuristic or a way to understand a fairly deep, complex concept without having to have a very superficial way in which this concept is described to you.
So like the Bible has moral stories that
Right.
people needed.
So, well, just to take this even without even having to use the Bible, like just telling a story, if you have to describe to a child how to act good in a certain situation that they might find themselves in the world, how to be brave in the right situation or whatever, the way you describe that to the child is not going to be, in terms of like, well, if scenario A happens, then you must, and describe it in a completely abstract manner.
Yeah, it's going to be more poetic.
We learn through story, we learn through that way, and also you can convey a deeper meaning and more information through story and through a certain narrative and a way that you tell things and the way you represent things, at least partly because that's a lot of the way our minds work, and that's a lot of the way we've evolved and developed to be able to understand certain concepts that are related to story, that are related to people doing things, that are related to aspects that aren't so far abstracted from the object world that we end up losing understanding of quite complex moral dilemmas and that sort of thing.
So I think when you were saying about flat earthers in that respect, I think they just want to feel.
As a community.
Yeah, I think they feel alienated. Therefore, they want to own their outsider status. So they band together. In that sense,
Can we call them flatties?
Flatties, Reikists. And
My friend's got an
Barnums.
interesting theory about the whole flat Earth thing. In that
It started on 4chan, wasn't it?
that wasn't what he said.
Oh.
He reckons, and this is actually, I do kind of half believe this, or that it could happen. It was basically started as a kind of devil's advocate concept by genuine physicists, geophysicists, whatever,
Right.
just to see
Okay.
could it work,
Right.
like what would happen if the Earth was actually flat, and basically somehow got out of hand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people picked up on it
Well.
again and genuinely either thought it was true or just latched onto it some other way, and it gained momentum and got to kind of where it is now.
Yeah, well, it's fun. It's fun stuff. Like, okay, so in this scenario, we can't have gravity because gravity can't be. So, well, what's it's identical to the property of gravity, the fact that you're accelerating at a certain rate, through space. So it's like, oh, well, it has to be accelerating at a certain, at 9.81 meters, and that, then you get gravity again, and it's like all this like really funny stuff where it's like, okay, so how can we gerrymander the properties of what we observe to try and like fit this, hypothesis. And you can go quite far with it, which is what's funny about it. But obviously, like the number of Occam's razor just has to go out the window because you have to start making so many assumptions about what you're doing and how you're doing it.
It's like when we thought that they had like a geocentric view of the like solar system, and then this fucking crazy like astrolabes that showed like the way that the stars orbited, and they went, oh no, it's just the sun, and then everything just got simplified down to like however like 9 rings or whatever.
The thing about geocentrism over heliocentrism is that geocentrism actually works, and it's more of a functional truth in the way that because so far as what you experience every day, that is the truth. It's only with instruments we realise that, but cartographers used maps that were based on that, and they work. And as far as science is concerned, a lot of the time it's more what's functional than true with a big capital T.
Yeah, that's sort of what you were saying about the functional truth of something. It's like they'd figured out how to do it. They'd figured out how they can navigate, because it doesn't matter really, as long as it works. It doesn't matter about how they do it. But it's just like that point where they went, oh yeah, this is much simpler if we just like you're saying about Kuhn earlier on, like if you shift your paradigm and go, oh actually no, it's just the other one.
You've got to remember, like, a behaviour in the sense that the way you can go about doing something the behaviour itself doesn't have to have a true intention for it to be a true behaviour. So you can, for example, go out to do something. I'm trying to think of a good analogy.
So
but it's difficult.
You can not kill someone because you believe in heaven.
Yes,
but
exactly.
But it's like it's good not to like kill random people anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And you shouldn't like.
Yeah.
But you can use
you can have you can have that as your truth. That you would get to heaven if you don't do that, and it was still fun.
But it's like above that truth is like the behavioural truth. You are acting in a truthful way.
Yeah.
But it's like the underlying reason for why you are behaving in a truthful way might not be the most truthful reason. So it's like, so you have this sort of separation of behavioural truth and like what the actual truth of the situation is. If a batsman at a baseball game or whatever is like, has this superstition of a certain way, he, throws the bat and hits the ball and it works every single time. It doesn't matter if the way in which he is managing to do this is not truthful about the way he feels about the world. If he's like inventing some fantasy in which like, he believes that like a spirit is embodying him and he feels this and it like, hits the ball and that helps him to go, that's not true. That's not what's actually happening. But the output behaviour, if the result is actually more truthful in the sense that the ball flies more true, what you've ended up seeing is that the output is more truthful, even though the underlying fact of it is not.
Yes.
So you see this disassociation between like the output behaviour being more truthful than the actual underlying fact. And if you apply this to stuff like, when we see stuff like neural networks and whatever, where what they're essentially doing is they're not mapping one to one. Sorry, I'm sorry. I think it's quite interesting in the sense that like if you look at like a traditional chess engine and the way that a traditional chess engine is like literally looking as many perfect moves ahead as it possibly can, is going, well, I've looked at this many moves, this is the perfect thing to do now. This behaviour that it now does next is based on the logical, computation of what is the optimal way to behave in a certain scenario. Unfortunately, the world is far too complicated to ever do that. You can never be like a chess engine. You can't one-to-one map an input with an output. You can't look at a complex moral dilemma and one-to-one have an output because the situation branches so complexly that it's impossible. So what have we seen with stuff like neural networks? What's ended up happening is they sort of almost invent these heuristics for how they figure out for things to work through behaviour first. So what they're doing is they're testing things, they're doing things, and if the behaviour works, if the behaviour gets a truthful output, then that is a more truthful behaviour in the way that it is being developed than if it just tries to brute force think further ahead. And then you start seeing this weird like detachment from trying to figure out the most logical, rational, the most mathematical way of possibly finding through a scenario, versus just trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. Okay, well, this idea or concept works, this heuristic works. The batsman really does think that there's a spirit embodying it, and he starts telling his friends, and their friends start seeing the behaviour. They start also embodying this weird spirit thing or whatever their idea is about how they have, and that helps them, and suddenly the behaviour. And it's like, what you realise is like, well, that's, what they're doing is not truthful, but at the same time, there is some weird thing going on where there is something there's some deeper truth that's been discovered, but the complexity of it is too much that you end up having to come up with a heuristic to try and explain the behaviour.
Yeah.
And the behaviour ends up becoming more truthful than the underlying idea. To end that tangent anyway, for what you were saying.
Yeah, and that was one of that kind of thinking about belief and superstition is what really dealt a blow to my very, very critical kind of atheism that I used to have. And yeah, those kind of questions about belief are really interesting.
How are you aligned now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm still an atheist, but I'm not critical of religion. I'm critical of fundamentalist religion, where the metaphysics takes over the ethical beliefs. Right. But where the metaphysics is window dressing or just something very complicated and deeper, that's a kind of different question. I don't agree with it, but I realise that I can't criticise it in the way that we're now criticising pseudoscience. We can't criticise it on a scientific level because it's not trying to be science. It's more a kind of poetry and
collected knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, so I had an anecdote. Somebody I know works in a hair salon, and they cut your hair for a start.
you haven't for fucking ages.
Yeah, you would
clearly like
stay at that bar now.
Yeah, fucking hell.
Yeah, and they've this hair salon's rented out a room to a Reikist. And she, I mean, in the salon, all she offers is crystal. All she offers is crystal sound activation, and
hey, look, don't fuck with crystals.
Massages and Reiki.
See, massage is like a fucking art form.
But this is the thing. She is a qualified masseuse.
Fair.
But the Reiki and the crystal sound activation obviously have no basis or anything. And there's things like hair salons, and I used to work in an old people's home, and there were cards being left everywhere for Reikists, and I'm just going to call them Reikists now.
It's stuck now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Practitioners of Reiki. And
it's because you get across your negative feeling towards them about them.
I mean,
you know that they're just stealing.
These kinds of places, like, so people don't just go to hair salons for haircuts. They're a big centre of the community, and it's where gossip happens, and it's where you can often find a lot of. I mean, these kind of practices, especially, she's also a medium on the side, and
she is.
These things are linked. She has cards, and these cards.
You've got to play the field.
These cards hint to other practices. So, and I think they always seem to target. There's always money involved, and they always target the grieving, the elderly, and the ignorant.
Those who are searching for meaning after loss or loneliness or whatever.
Well, she offers
vulnerable people.
She offers the ability. When I worked in that old people's home and I saw like Reiki and stuff, because there are people. This is not just an old people's home. It was a old people's home for the mentally ill. Yeah. That's where you keep your whatever nonsense you happen to believe. You keep that to yourself. You don't target people that don't know any better. You don't charge them over the odds to pretend to fix a problem they might have. I actually ripped up the cards and I threw them in the bin.
Yeah, it's a bit of an
That's not really.
Yeah, and these these mediumship things she does. I mean, it's like £30 a session, and it's obviously it's going to be more sessions and
for like an hour.
Yeah, 40 minutes I think, and she or maybe even half an hour, and she promises to speak to loved ones. It gets and to contact grave. And she's always like, I've had these powers since I was little. Well, if you had powers, why aren't you working for the government? Why aren't you doing anything with them other than...
Yeah, why aren't you throwing questions back to Isaac Newton? Do you know what I mean? Why aren't you
it doesn't work like that. The energies won't let me. But then she also believes in the...
Isaac Newton wouldn't talk to girls either.
Yeah, to be
It's not a
fair.
virgin, it's fine, like,
To be fair.
But she also believes in.
That's where his power came from, his massive brain.
supreme accelerator.
He had blue balls and like blue veins in his giant frontal lobe.
the Galactic Federation.
Yeah, literally like.
No. This
Is that how brain
woman,
power works?
this woman thinks she can talk to the Galactic Federation.
Oh, dude.
As in
Well, Star
a
Trek.
Galactic Federation or the Galactic Federation
Oh, the- there's only
from
one-
the Star Wars.
There's only
So
one,
she
Don't be
decided
stupid now.
she's not only like rinsed the widows and the mentally ill, vulnerable old, but she's now going after the fucking lonely virgin angle as well.
Yeah, and
I'll bring you closer to Worf.
I really don't want to come across as mean.
She a bitch.
But go on.
No, that was on. I mean,
No,
I just because one of the things I wanted to talk about was the ethics of kind of
I think
challenging these beliefs.
I think that if you're doing that, it's generally fucking horrible. You know what you're doing,
Well, does she?
probably.
I don't want to say she's mentally ill, but that can be one cause of
It's very
why some
delusional.
people might practice this.
And you've also got to remember, it's like some people, and it's, you know, not maybe, some people will actually be getting more, actually some happiness from this, or getting some
Of
connection.
course, yeah.
And then, you know, that is a bit of a weird moral dilemma with it. Like, how much is it abusive, and how much is it, again, that sort of weird placebo effect of them thinking that something real is going on, and it actually gives them some form of fulfillment or happiness.
Well, so then do it for free. Don't do it for £30 an hour.
Yeah,
as soon as you're charging, or maybe not free. Do it for like less than £30 an hour.
There's also no
That's a
guarantees with the way it
crazy
works.
price.
She says, I can't
What do you
actually.
reckon?
Yeah, it's not.
It's the
She,
thing, like,
she
if I-
says it's not an exact science. It's not. It's not a science. It's a pseudoscience.
If I run the other end of
It's not
this,
even that.
the first thing I'd do is get her to try and tell me something that only like my loved one who passed away or whatever would know. Some kind of thing like that, just to prove it to me that it's legit. And I imagine she'd have some kind of excuse lined up. But I don't
Or
know.
she's incredibly good at reading people because there are magicians and things that
That's true.
that can extract things like that from you.
Definitely.
That is true.
And they're the first to admit that this is a secular practice. This isn't bound in any kind of superstition. They're just reading you. They're just using psychological tricks and finding things out. And maybe
Mentalists.
maybe she has
Yeah.
that.
Have you seen like a load of like these mentalists who can like read what you're thinking with like twitches and like movements and stuff?
Yeah, well,
Pretty cool.
who's the famous magician?
Darren
Darren
Brown.
Dan Brown. Yeah.
He's the
Yeah.
calls himself a mentalist, yeah, an illusionist or whatever.
There's another guy called I can't remember. It's like Bergerac or something. Like he named himself after like a detective on a Polish TV show, and he was on the Rojogan podcast, and he was talking about how he just
Just the road over.
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Red pill. He was talking about how he managed to con his way into like working for the government, and they had this guy who was like he used to work for the BBC, and like halfway through one shoot, one day he just went. He looked at it, he had like this massive wet patch of his trousers, and he said that he had a demonic ejaculation. It was like, yeah, it was like, so this guy was talking about how he used to work for like a government, and then like he's just talking about it, and then like this guy's telling stories like, oh yeah, and then like one day he just had a hard and he's like spunked over her, and then he started screaming about how he had demonic ejaculation, and then Joe Rogan was like, whoa, back that up, let's go over this story again. So there are some like crazy fucking people out there who believe in this stuff and will just like pay loads
Two
of
words I
money.
never thought I'd hear in the same sentence.
Demonic ejaculation. But yeah, it's good.
How
It's
did we
good.
get here?
Yeah, but I think as well, going back to the flat earth and why people believe it, I think it gives them a sense of meaning, and I think when it comes to mediums and things, to know your place in a higher order of things, and to be acquainted with that higher order. That's why I've always found this idea of humility in Christianity very strange, because I mean, sure, the lessons teach humility to a staggering extent, but also, you know, you're given a divine purpose. That's not, and besides, you know the nature of everything. You know that there's a God, that he's not just that he is a God. You know it's gendered. It's singular. It's not a pantheon.
So, yeah.
It's not polytheism. It's the Abrahamic God of all gods. It's an interventionist God. It's not a kind of God that sits back and doesn't, like deism. and that it's not just the Abrahamic God, but it's the Christian God, and it's not just the Christian God, but it's your denomination of Christianity, and then you might even have that sense of I know better than you with people in your church. So you pin it down that much, and it's like, how humble is that? Not very.
No,
For you to think you know all of that, that's not very humble at all.
Because you see that there's like a ladder, and you're trying to, by knowing more, climb above the ladder.
Yeah.
So like you were saying that if there's someone who knows more about, so I guess what you're trying to say is like if you know more about the Bible than someone else, all you're doing is dragging yourself up that ladder. So you're not being humble.
Yeah, like the thing about having a sense of purpose is a really strong driver for believing in all kinds of deities and stuff. Because like if you think about it, like why we're here and our existence, go down that rabbit hole for a bit, it starts to get pretty unnerving. Like it'd be really nice just to have an explanation in a book that explains everything.
And that's
I don't think you necessarily should buy into all of that at once. I think you should approach it judgmentally, and a lot of Christians and other religions do. They don't cherry pick, but they analyse and think, okay, that sounds more legit than that, and they draw their own conclusions, which is good. But I think if you jump into it blindly, and this goes with, I might be making a bit of a stretch here, but for example, politics, like you say you're on the left or you're on the right, but it's very much a spectrum. Like people seem to just fall into this, and we're seeing it a lot, obviously, in the current political climate with the Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, people want to belong somewhere.
Because you believe in this thing, you don't have to believe in everything they believe in. You can choose. You have your own mind. Like humans can think. Why don't you use that?
But no, because when you start thinking, like you're saying, thinking's hard, and then when you start thinking, you find out things about yourself, and it's like exactly. It's like a comfort thing. You go, oh God, I don't want to think. I just want to know that I have purpose. I want to know that I have meaning, and just live on that. And then I'll get really religious when I get older.
It's one of the most amazing things about humans, I think, is that we have like almost no other animal has that capacity to actually think and draw their own conclusions, and be self-aware outside their own existence. I think it's just such a shame that people basically just squander that.
Yeah, that's the challenge of atheism, and that's probably why I was more militant in my atheism to begin with, because I kind of retreated into this very self-assured kind of atheism, because I wasn't ready to accept that there's a big fucking void of open questions. These questions aren't closed. They will continue to go on forever and ever. People will have to sit down like this and talk on every topic forever, and it's a continuing conversation. Ethics is a continuing conversation. There is no right and wrong, and a lot of the time,
potentially could be, but we have no fucking idea at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I would love it if ethics was set, but so. With mediumship, a lot of the times they invoke ideas of the light and the dark, and
there's some mad.
They want to moralise.
Star Wars.
They want to.
What's they're called? Fuck that. The young thing, archetypes, the mad archetypes, isn't it? There's just like good, evil, yin yang, all that shit, all the chaos.
Yeah, I think they want to believe in this binary sense, because that is gone.
It's easy as fuck
in this postmodern world. That really is gone.
Well, I think a lot of this stuff boils down to I think there's to some degree an innate framework in human beings to gravitate towards homogeneity in certain systems. And I think that likely has an advantage in some sense, that you can't evolve a species that is constantly entirely skeptical of everything constantly around them. You have to have, to a certain degree, people who just accept the status quo and accept and also want to gravitate towards a certain homogeneity within the things they believe and the things they do. Because otherwise you can't build societies. You have to have to a certain degree, you have to have this innate homogeneity built into people. Because if everyone's constantly questioning the things they do and behaving in their own completely individualistic way, at least traditionally when we're talking about like evolutionary history, you end up with literally no ability to actually create a more optimal cultural system. And I think that's definitely a factor in this, is that it is an innate aspect of most people that unfortunately I think we have to become sort of meta aware of the fact that you do tend to want to gravitate towards a homogeneity in your culture, in the way you think, and the way done, and that's not innately a bad thing. It's innately an advantageous thing. Yeah. It can be a very advantageous thing to fit in.
Need to be aware
because the other thing to remember is like a imperfect cultural system where everyone is following the rules and everyone is doing it is far superior to a perfect cultural system where nobody is following the rules and everyone's doing what the hell they want.
Yeah, you're saying it's superior, but in terms of what?
In terms of its evolutionary advantage. So it's like, so I'm thinking in terms of how these things would have developed in the first place and how humans have become built to want to gravitate towards tribalism.
Sure, but we're not like that
so you mean like evolutionary, like just
No, we are still like that.
Like making more.
Yeah,
That's like the when I think evolution, I think of make more. It's not like making.
Survive, yeah.
It's not like survive is like that's fine. You could die as long as you have like 6 kids. So it's like when I think evolutionary, it's like you're just trying to spread. You don't care about. So it's like when they had like the Cultural Revolution when people started farming. It was good for evolution. People's like quality of arguably whatever sapiens or that shit, or arguably some quality of life went down. But then it helped because spread more.
We're just saying that's a truth that we need to come to terms with.
Well, I think
there's
we're not saying it's good or bad.
What I'm saying is there is
innate,
very likely a big aspect
Okay,
towards human nature, which is innately wants to be homogenous to a certain extent, and not everyone is going to have people who are more individualistic. Every tribe is going to have the individuals who want to question the system, and that you have to have a certain percentage of people who do, because that helps create a more healthy system. But the problem is if everyone is doing that and everyone is not tribal at all, you have no cooperation. So this is the problem. Is I think purely from an evolutionary standpoint, I think part of the reason why we've inherited this sort of very tribal mentality is from the fact that it does have an evolutionary advantage to a certain extent. It becomes really difficult to try and figure out exactly where the puzzle piece of these different aspects of how we behave and how we decide to behave, and cooperation. You can bring game theory into it in a way in which we do behave in societies is actually rationally self-interested to a certain extent. It's like you can bring in all these different sort of models to try and explain it, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, people are also on top of that just very, very fucking complicated. So purely using evolutionary systems like I was just doing to explain entirely the behaviour in which we're being tribal, not tribal, is not a valid way of analysing it. It's one way of analysing it that could potentially have a bearing in how we start viewing why a lot of these things spring up, and a lot of the way we to arrange ourselves seemingly irrationally. Because they could have had rational reasons for why from a different perspective, whether that's game theory, whether that's evolutionary biology, whether that's just a purely rational reason, whatever it is.
It's like that geezer who who's the guy who discovered Brownian motion, where probably someone brown, but and he talks about how there's a general moving of gas, isn't there? It's a general moving of gas, but every single particle in there is like bubbling around its own thing, and that's how people think. That's how society evolves. That's how things move. So you think you're making individual choices. You think that you're not playing into the game. You think you're being outside of the meta looking in. You think you understand what's going on, but you're still moving within the flux of that gas.
You're
gas
an eddy
cloud.
current in the.
Yeah, no matter how skeptical you are, because it's like when you talking about people who are like challenging and being a bit skeptical things, they'll just meet other people who are skeptical and challenging, and then they form homogenous groups of skeptical, challenging people.
That often happens.
So it's just like that. That's just how it works. I think people are just looking for people who are similar to themselves,
No, you
but
got
not
to
too
be
similar.
even more sceptical.
You're gonna be
You're
even more
the
edgy.
only person in the world who believes what you believe, and then if you convince someone, you have to stop believing
You
it.
could be like, who's is it Dionysus? The geezer lives. Is it
Diogenes.
Dionysus, the Greek god of wine.
Live in a barrel, yeah.
Yeah, you got to live in a barrel.
Absolute legend.
Piss on someone.
Should we pause it a sec? Because I need a piss.